Not just disbelief, not just laughter, but a slow, deliberate campaign to humiliate him. Flyers, fake videos, edited audio. Social media turned into a courtroom with no defense, no jury, and no mercy. His only crime? Wearing a hoodie, speaking quietly, and telling the truth in a place that only listens when you scream. This is Jamal Reed's story, but it could have been anyone's. Any black boy who ever sat in a classroom where teachers called on him last, where classmates whispered affirmative action under their breath, where the only thing louder than the jokes was the silence when he needed someone to speak up. You've heard the headlines: student falsely accused, racist prank goes too far, teen stands up to bullying. But you haven't heard this version, the one where the teen doesn't clap back, doesn't yell, doesn't crumble. He just walks every day with his hoodie up and his dignity intact, until one day the system he never tried to fight breaks itself trying to bury him. Because what they didn't know, what they never even thought to ask, was who his father really was. And when the truth finally shows up, it doesn't come in anger, it comes in silence. The kind of silence that makes power nervous. This isn't just a school story, it's a story about belonging, identity, and the battle to simply be believed. It's about what happens when black excellence doesn't fit the mold society expects, and how dangerous that becomes to people who built their confidence on stereotypes. But more than that, it's about what wins in the end. And it's not the loudest voice, and it's the most unshakable one. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been talked over, laughed at, profiled, or told to prove yourself one more time, this story is for you, because this isn't a revenge arc. This is a revelation. And by the time we reach the final scene, you'll understand why we say, don't judge the cloth, see the courage beneath. This is Silent Power Stories. And this is the story of a hoodie they tried to mock, but couldn't ignore. Let's begin. He always walked through the side entrance, never the grand stone steps where the legacy kids pose for Instagram. Jamal preferred the quiet path by the art wing, where the sun barely touched the windows and no one asked him questions. His hoodie was always up, gray and faded, the drawstrings uneven from years of wear. It wasn't a fashion statement, it was armor. And in a place like Kensington Prep, armor wasn't optional, it was survival. Kensington Prep wasn't built for boys like Jamal. Not really. Sure, the brochures boasted about diversity, and they'd posted his picture on the admissions page once. But the halls still echoed with entitlement. Names like Van Buren, Prescott, and Hallowell dominated every classroom. Their parents sat on the school board. Their siblings had wings named after them. Jamal, he just had his hoodie, and a last name no one knew how to pronounce until the day they had to. He was always early, sat in the back row, pulled out his notebook, and wrote. Not school notes, he already knew half the curriculum. What he wrote were thoughts, observations, equations that didn't exist in textbooks. The hoodie helped. People ignored kids in hoodies. That was the trick. If you looked invisible, they stopped watching. And when they stopped watching, you could start learning everything they didn't want you to know. Most days, Jamal didn't speak. Not out of fear. He just didn't see the point. At Kensington, words were currency. But his words weren't minted in the same place. When he did talk, it was soft, clipped, calculated. Teachers often marked him absent mentally, even when he was sitting right there. Except for one, Mr. Allen, the chemistry teacher, a Korean American with sharp eyes and quiet respect. He never underestimated Jamal, which is why they didn't like him either. At lunch, Jamal sat alone by the science wing courtyard. Other students avoided that side. Too cold in winter, too quiet in spring. Perfect for him. He liked to sketch ideas on napkins, machine parts, city layouts, encrypted ciphers. One time, a freshman asked if he was drawing graffiti plans. Jamal had smiled and said, "Just drawing the future." The kid laughed. But Jamal never did. The hoodie wasn't always part of Jamal's story. It started in 6th grade, the year his mom was diagnosed and his dad disappeared into classified meetings. One day she handed him the hoodie before her second round of chemo. "So you stay warm, baby," she said. "But more than that, so they don't see your light until it's too late to stop it." He never stopped wearing it after that. He didn't look like someone meant for legacy walls. He looked like someone the security office might watch a second longer in the hallway cameras. Kensington had rules, unwritten ones. Dress codes were flexible for the right last names. Loud voices were encouraged if they came with a trust fund. Jamal knew where he stood. He didn't want to be feared. He just didn't want to be underestimated. When teachers asked about his parents, he kept it vague. "My dad works in D.C." That was true. He just didn't mention the building, or the security clearance, or the fact that once an encrypted phone call in their kitchen had grounded an entire foreign airspace for 6 hours. People didn't believe you when you didn't dress the part, so Jamal didn't bother correcting them. His father, Leon Reed, was the kind of man who carried presence like weight. Even in silence, he filled rooms. But he never bragged. He'd taught Jamal that real power never shouts. It listens, it waits, it moves when the moment is right, and never before. Jamal had memorized that lesson the way other kids memorize TikTok dances. And the hoodie? It became the symbol of that philosophy. No one at Kensington knew who Leon Reed was. Some thought Jamal's father was a contractor. One girl once asked if he did lift on the side. Jamal had smiled politely. He wasn't offended, not anymore. Assumptions were camouflage. They gave him space, and he'd learned that when they looked away, you had time to prepare your next move. His best subject wasn't math or English or even tech design. It was observation, watching people, seeing what made them tick. Kensington was a case study in microaggression economics. A raised eyebrow here, a "you're articulate" there. Jamal cataloged it all, not to get revenge, but to understand how the world was wired and how to build something stronger in its place. Once during a debate, a classmate had scoffed, "You think you know more than my dad? He runs a hedge fund." Jamal had simply replied, "I know how the power grid in D.C. works." The class laughed, assuming it was a joke. But his dad had shown him the schematics once, over dinner after a 3-hour blackout. "The city runs on secrets," his father had said. Jamal never forgot that. He wasn't angry. That's what confused people most. He didn't sulk. He didn't complain. He didn't try to prove them wrong. He just watched, learned, waited. Some teachers saw that as passivity, but Mr. Allen once pulled him aside and said, "Still water cuts deeper, Jamal. Don't let them make you stir before it's time." That was the day Jamal stopped second-guessing the hoodie. During assemblies, he sat at the edge of the bleachers, hoodie up, eyes open. He could hear everything, every whisper, every fake laugh, every subtle jab. One day, the headmaster made a speech about future leaders. The camera panned to the same 5 faces. Jamal wasn't one of them. He didn't mind. Cameras only see what they're told to look for. He was looking past them. He had one friend, if you could call it that, Amir Patel. a Pakistani-American kid who liked robotics and said bro too much. Amir didn't try to get Jamal. He just existed near him. That was enough. They sat in comfortable silence, building things after school. Once, Amir asked, "You ever think of taking that hoodie off just to see?" Jamal said, "No point hiding the thing that keeps me seen." The hoodie became part of the mythology. Students whispered theories. He's in a gang. He's got a record. He doesn't talk because he's plotting something. Jamal never corrected them. Their fears gave him space, and space gave him time. Every black hoodie at Kensington became suspicious after that. Even Amir got pulled aside once. "You hang with the quiet one too much," a coach warned. There was a security guard named Mrs. Grace, an older black woman who watched over the East Wing. She always nodded when Jamal passed, sometimes offered peppermints, never asked questions. One day she looked him straight in the eye and said, "Keep wearing that armor, baby. They don't know who they messing with." Jamal smiled, the smallest crack in his silence. Kensington had a hallway lined with plaques. Distinguished alumni, white men with stern faces, lawyers, CEOs, politicians. Jamal used to walk past quickly, but one day he stopped, pulled out a Sharpie and wrote something small in the corner of the frame. "Still waters." No one noticed, but he did, and that made it real. He had a rule: never speak unless it adds value. So most days he didn't, but when he did, people remembered. Once, during a philosophy class, a girl said, "Justice is about fairness." Jamal had raised his hand for the first time in weeks. "Justice is about balance," he said. "Fairness depends on who's holding the scale." The room went quiet. Even the teacher paused. He didn't try to be exceptional. That's what people missed. He didn't care about being top of class. He didn't need awards or praise. He was building something slower, deeper, a foundation, something no one could take from him. Not a reputation. Those could be burned, but a truth. One built from silence, study, and steel under cloth. The hoodie wasn't about hiding. It was about choosing who got access. Jamal had watched too many people give away their light to get into rooms not built for them. He wasn't doing that. If they couldn't see him through the cloth, that was their loss. He wasn't going to unzip his dignity to earn their respect. He'd once asked his father, "Do they ever stop underestimating you?" Leon had smiled. "Not if you wear it right." "Wear what?" Jamal asked. "Your silence," his father said. That night, Jamal folded his hoodie on the chair beside his bed, carefully, like a flag. The next morning, he wore it like armor again. The hoodie was a statement, but not the kind you post on social media. It was a whisper to the world. "I know what you think, and I'm still standing." And at Kensington Prep, where whispers were louder than truth, Jamal Reed walked silent, walked proud, walked in his hoodie. It began on a Thursday morning. Crisp fall air, golden leaves dancing across the Kensington Prep courtyard, and the kind of silence that only exists in a school where money dulls the sharp edges of teenage chaos. Jamal sat in the second row of Mr. Clayton's civics class, hoodie up, posture still, eyes forward. He always chose the second row. Not too eager, not too withdrawn, just there, a presence, not a statement. Mr. Clayton was the kind of teacher who loved to hear himself talk. Mid-40s, pressed khakis, silver cufflinks that gleamed under the fluorescent light, and a voice like he'd missed his true calling as a courtroom drama narrator. He addressed the class like a jury and delivered his lessons like verdicts. Today he had a gleam in his eye. That was never a good sign. "We're starting a new project," he said, scanning the room like he was daring someone to roll their eyes. "A 2-minute presentation on your parents' profession, their career, their accomplishments, and how that inspires your own future." A buzz went through the room. Laptops clicked open. Notes were exchanged. Jamal didn't move. Amir nudged him gently. "You got something good, man. Just say your dad's in D.C. That already sounds official." Jamal gave a half shrug. "We'll see." But something in him already knew. This wouldn't be about the project. This would be about him. He wasn't new to this feeling. At Kensington, being black wasn't the problem. Being black and not performative, that's what confused them. He didn't shuck. He didn't jive. He didn't throw in a slang phrase to make them laugh. And he never, ever said what they wanted to hear. He was quiet, and quiet made people nervous. Friday came too fast. Jamal rehearsed once that morning, just to himself in front of the mirror. He'd chosen his words carefully. "My name is Jamal Reed. My father works for the Department of Defense, overseeing cyber threat analysis and national security operations." That was all. Clean, true, professional. But he could already hear Clayton's reaction in his head. He wore his hoodie anyway. It was dark gray, soft from years of wear. His mother had stitched the left pocket after it tore on a chain-link fence back in middle school. Most people wore blazers for presentation day. Jamal wore history. The classroom buzzed as students presented. There was Ryan, whose dad managed hedge funds, Sophie, whose mom was on a Senate advisory board. Even Amir got a few impressed looks for saying his father built drone software. Then Clayton cleared his throat. "Mr. Reed, enlighten us." Jamal stood, walked to the front, no notes, just his hands in his hoodie pocket, one thumb nervously rubbing the stitching. He spoke clearly. "My father, Leon Reed, works for the Department of Defense. He manages cybersecurity and threat response at the federal level, coordinating systems that protect national digital infrastructure." Silence. He waited. Then Clayton smiled. Not the nice kind. "Well, I suppose we all feel safer now," he said, chuckling. "Thank you, Agent Reed." Scattered laughter. Jamal didn't flinch. Clayton wasn't done. "Tell me, Jamal, is that the kind of job where they give you a badge and let you carry a plastic gun around? Or are we talking secret agent, suits, sunglasses and all?" The room erupted. Even Amir froze. Jamal's jaw tightened. "My father's work isn't a joke." Clayton raised his hands. "Hey, just trying to clarify. It's not every day we get a future spy in the classroom." More laughter, this time louder. Jamal returned to his seat in silence, but inside something cracked. Not from embarrassment, from recognition. This was the beginning. After class, Amir tried to say something, but Jamal was already halfway down the hall. The hoodie was up again. His steps were measured, but his thoughts weren't. They spiraled. He'd followed every rule, spoken clearly, stuck to the truth, and still, it wasn't enough. In a school where one girl's mom made headlines for a Vogue feature and another kid's uncle was a Supreme Court clerk, Jamal's story still got turned into a joke because it didn't fit the image, because the words black, hoodie, and Pentagon don't compute for people like Clayton. By lunch, a photo was circulating. Someone had taken a screenshot of Jamal mid-sentence, edited it to add cartoon sunglasses and a toy FBI badge. The caption read, "Mission Impossible, Hoodie Protocol." The comments were brutal. "Bet his dad's in IT, not Intel." "Security? Like mall cop?" He probably watched one episode of Homeland and got inspired. Jamal didn't reply. He just saved the image, not to remember the insult, but to remember the moment the mask slipped. That evening, his father noticed the shift. Jamal sat quietly during dinner, pushing peas around his plate. Leon didn't press at first. He waited, then asked the question he always asked when he knew something was wrong. Was it a good day to be right? Jamal looked up. No, it was a day to be small. Leon set down his fork. Tell me. And Jamal did. Everything. The project, the laughter, the fake badge, the teacher. He didn't cry, he didn't raise his voice. He just told the story, and when he finished, Leon sat back in his chair. They made you feel like a liar. Jamal nodded. Leon's voice was soft. But you told the truth. Didn't matter, Jamal said. They laughed anyway. Leon was quiet for a long time. Then he said, that's because your truth is heavier than their world can carry. Jamal didn't understand it then. Not fully, but he remembered it. And that memory would one day become a shield. The next morning, someone had drawn a crude cartoon on the whiteboard in Clayton's room. A black stick figure in a hoodie with a speech bubble that said, "My dad works for the government, trust me." Jamal stood at the door watching it. He said nothing. Clayton walked in moments later, saw it, and chuckled. Someone's got a sense of humor, he said, and erased it, not with shame, but with amusement. Amir approached Jamal at his locker. Bro, this is messed up. Jamal kept his eyes on his locker. It's fine. No, it's not, Amir snapped. You told the truth, and they turned it into a meme. Jamal closed the locker slowly. I'm not the first. That silenced Amir. For the rest of the day, Jamal moved like usual. But his silence now had edges. Sharper, defined, cutting through every fake smile and forced apology. Later that week, Clayton made another comment, this time about imagination being a gift, especially when you don't have legacy connections. He was looking directly at Jamal. The class laughed again. Even the ones who knew it was wrong. No one said anything. No one ever did. Because calling it just a joke was easier. Because being black and proud and quiet in a place like Kensington, that was always too loud for them. That night, Leon stood in Jamal's doorway. He held something in his hand. It was a challenge coin, one of those heavy metal tokens given by federal agencies for exceptional service. He placed it on Jamal's desk. This is from the day I deactivated a ransomware virus targeting our defense network, a virus planted by a hostile nation. My name is engraved on the inside. They don't hand these out for nothing. Jamal picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. Leon looked him in the eye. You don't need to prove who I am, but if they ever doubt who you are, let this remind you. Jamal nodded. I won't forget. The next day, Jamal walked into class early, hoodie up, shoulders straight. He took his seat, pulled out his notebook, and placed the coin beside it. Deliberate, visible. Clayton walked in and stopped short when he saw it. He didn't say a word, but Jamal saw the flicker, recognition, respect. No fear, just a flash. And then it was gone. But it was enough. The jokes didn't stop completely, but they got quieter. Clayton called on Jamal less. Students stopped sharing memes. And one by one, the whisperers turned into watchers. Because Jamal hadn't yelled, hadn't fought, hadn't cursed. He just stood, solid, silent, unmoving. And that silence said everything. The cafeteria at Kensington Prep wasn't just a place for eating. It was the stage for silent war. There were no food fights, no thrown fists. Everything was clean, polished, and gleaming with expensive indifference. But every student knew what happened in the lunchroom echoed louder than what happened in the classroom. Jamal had always navigated it quietly. He sat at the corner table with Amir, under a flickering light that buzzed softly overhead. No one else sat there. No one asked why. It was unspoken, just like everything else at Kensington. But that day everything shifted. He felt it the moment he entered. The way the noise dipped, the way heads turned too quickly, the way phones were tilted just slightly in his direction. Amir was already seated, staring at his phone with a clenched jaw. "They posted it," he said without looking up. Jamal slid into the seat. "What did they post?" Amir turned the phone around. The thumbnail already told Jamal what he needed to know. His own face, mid-sentence during his presentation, frozen with a half blink that looked dazed and clueless. Over it, in big block letters, "Agent Hoodie, Operation Make-Believe." He tapped play. The video opened with distorted spy music. A grainy filter had been layered over the footage to make it look like surveillance. Jamal stood at the front of Clayton's classroom saying, "My father works for the Department of Defense." Cut. Now a voiceover kicked in, someone mimicking a cartoonish voice. "My daddy's in the CIA, and I'm Batman." Laughter cut again, to a zoomed-in shot of Jamal's hoodie. Then another caption, "Mission Delusional." The video ended with a laugh track and a fake explosion graphic. Amir paused it. "Already has over 1,000 views," he muttered. "Someone tagged you on it. And me." Jamal didn't speak. He watched it again. This time he looked closer. At the shadows in the frame. At the angle of the video. Whoever filmed it had been 3 rows back, slightly to the left. "Carter," he said. Amir nodded. "And Tyler edited it. You can hear his voice in the background." Jamal inhaled through his nose. Controlled. Even. Still not angry. Just processing. "Any teachers seen it?" "Probably. It's public. People are sharing it like it's comedy." Jamal slid the phone back across the table. "Let them laugh." But inside he felt it. That slow, cold burn. The kind that didn't explode. It eroded. He opened his milk, took a sip, and in that moment, a hush fell over the cafeteria. He looked up. Carter Van Allen was standing on a chair, holding up his phone, projecting his voice just enough to be heard, but not enough to get scolded. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "a moment of gratitude. Today we all feel a little safer knowing that Agent Reed here is watching over our cyber infrastructure." Chuckles rippled. Carter grinned wider. "Maybe he can hack the vending machines for us next." A few students clapped mockingly. Jamal didn't move, didn't blink. He stared at Carter the same way he looked at unsolved equations. Something to be understood, not feared. Carter didn't like that. He wanted a reaction, wanted fire. Instead, Jamal gave him silence. And that silence felt heavier than any insult. Jamal didn't eat that day, not because he didn't want to, but because he knew every bite, every move would be watched, recorded, dissected. He'd become a walking target, the boy in the hoodie who dared to stand tall in a room full of legacies, and now they were testing just how tall he could stand. After lunch, he moved through the hallways with steady steps, shoulders relaxed, eyes forward. But inside, his mind was racing. Every glance felt like a camera lens, every whisper a caption. Outside the history classroom, a girl named Harper, blonde, loud, and part of the it circle, held up her phone as he passed. Smile for the NSA, Jamal, she giggled. Her friend added, we should call him Double O Nobody. Laughter followed. Amir caught up behind him, eyes blazing. I swear to God, I'm gonna... Don't, Jamal cut him off. But they want us to explode, Jamal said calmly. They want a headline. Angry black boy can't take a joke. Not today. Amir exhaled through gritted teeth. You're stronger than me. No, Jamal replied, just more practiced. In seventh period, someone had taped a flyer to the back wall of the classroom. A black and white photocopy. Grainy photo of Jamal in his hoodie. The same shot from the video. This time the caption read, Agent Hoodie, Defender of Fiction. Below it, in red Sharpie, catch him live in homeroom. Mr. Klein, the teacher, peeled it off before class started. Looked at Jamal, didn't say a word, just crumpled it and tossed it in the bin. But the damage was done. The room laughed anyway. Jamal opened his notebook, wrote one sentence. They want me to kneel without touching the floor. He circled it twice, then underlined it. That evening, he sat at the kitchen table. Laptop open, phone buzzing. The comments kept piling in. Some were anonymous accounts, some weren't. What stung weren't the insults. It was the people who said nothing. People he'd helped with homework. Sat next to for years, people who saw him every day and now acted like the joke was worth more than the truth. Leon walked in quietly, set down a cup of tea. You gonna let them write the ending? Jamal shook his head. But I'm not sure how to rewrite it. Leon pulled out a folder. Inside, photos, newspaper clippings, a framed article about a major cyber attack from 5 years ago. Jamal recognized the language, the patterns. Is this... Leon nodded. That was mine. I don't need the credit, but it's yours if you want it. Jamal's hand hovered over the article. What if I show them and they still laugh? Then you'll know it was never about truth, Leon said. It was always about power. Jamal looked up. And silence? Leon sipped his tea. Silence is the loudest threat to those who live off noise. The next morning, something had changed. Not in the hallways, not in the tone of the jokes, but in Jamal. He walked differently, not faster, not more confidently, just heavier, like he was carrying something important, but wouldn't let it fall. When he reached his locker, another flyer was taped there. This one said, Top secret, Hoodie boy's dad cleans Pentagon bathrooms. The print was fresh. Jamal peeled it off slowly, carefully folded it into 4 parts, placed it in his folder next to the others. He wasn't collecting insults. He was collecting evidence. Truth wasn't what you said once. It was what you built piece by piece in full view of those who swore you didn't have it. During homeroom, Carter stood at the front of the class holding a mock briefing. This just in, he announced, using a ruler as a microphone. We have new intel from inside the Reed household. The microwave is officially hacked. More laughter. Alicia Monroe rolled her eyes. Mr. Clayton watched from his desk, smirking. Didn't say a word. Jamal stared ahead. He imagined his father's voice. Sometimes the strongest move is no move at all. So he made no move until the bell rang. Then he stood, walked to the front of the class, took Carter's ruler gently out of his hand, tapped the board twice, and in bold letters wrote, Intelligence is not who laughs the loudest, it's who remains standing when the laughter fades. Then he handed the ruler back and walked out. The room was dead silent. Even Carter didn't speak. That afternoon, he went to Ms. Daniels' office, Dean of Students. He placed a stack of printed pages on her desk, screenshots of every video, every flyer, every tagged post, names, timestamps. "Do you want us to discipline them?" she asked. Jamal shook his head. "I want it on record." "Why?" He met her eyes. "Because this isn't about me. The next kid won't have a father in defense, or a friend like Amir. They'll have silence, and they'll think it's not enough. I want them to know it is." Daniels didn't speak for a moment. Then she leaned back. "I'll keep it on file." "Good," Jamal said, "because someday silence will speak louder than this whole school." Later that week, during a school-wide assembly, the principal took the stage, said they were launching a new anti-bullying initiative, said they believed every student's voice mattered, said they would not tolerate targeted harassment. No one mentioned Jamal. No one mentioned flyers, but every student knew. And as the principal spoke, Carter kept his eyes down. Tyler scratched the back of his neck. Harper checked her phone but didn't smile. Because now the silence wasn't Jamal's. It was theirs. After the assembly, Alicia caught up with Jamal. "You didn't flinch," she said. "That was powerful." He nodded once. She paused, then asked, "Why didn't you fight back? Post something. Say something." He shrugged. "Because they would have controlled the story. My story isn't about revenge. It's about restraint." She smiled. "Software? Real." "Still," she said, "I'm glad you didn't disappear." He looked at her. "I couldn't. I'm not the one who should." That evening, at home, he sat across from his dad again. This time no tea, just silence. A good silence. Leon finally asked, "Was it a good day to be right?" Jamal thought for a moment, then smiled. "Just a little. Yeah, it was." Leon nodded, and nothing more needed to be said. The next day the hallway was quieter. The whispers were softer. The posters were gone. And though some still stared, they didn't laugh. Because they'd seen what real power looked like. Not in a punch, not in a post, but in a boy in a hoodie who never gave them the show. It started with a ping. Jamal was sitting on his bed, hoodie on, trying to finish an English paper, when his phone vibrated. At first, he ignored it. Another meme, probably. Another DM from a fake account telling him to lighten up or just admit you lied. He'd been getting them for days, but this one wasn't a message. It was a tag from someone he didn't even follow. He opened it, paused, stared. His chest tightened, not with fear, with a kind of cold anger that didn't flare up. It settled deep in his stomach, like a stone. It was a photo, a split screen. On the left, a picture of Jamal from the school hallway, his hoodie half off, mid-yawn, clearly taken without his knowledge. On the right, a Google screenshot of a mugshot, some random black man with the same last name, Reed. Captioned, "Like father, like son. Kensington's agent hoodie exposed." The comment section was a wildfire. People tagged friends, laughed, added their own captions. By morning it was viral, at least in school terms. More than 2,000 views on private school Instagram loops, dozens of reposts. No one checked the facts. They just believed. Because it was easier to believe a black boy lied than to imagine he came from truth. The next day, the school felt colder. Even Amir was shaken. "They photoshopped that mugshot to match your dad's face." Jamal scrolled through quietly. "They didn't even need to try. No one cares about accuracy." "You gonna show Miss Daniels?" Jamal shook his head. "Why not?" Because they don't care until it hurts their brand. Amir winced. This already crossed a line. No, Jamal said softly. That line's been gone. This is what comes after the line. By third period, Clayton had seen the post. Everyone could tell. He walked into class smiling, too wide. His smirk wasn't directed at Jamal, not openly, but it lingered, like he was proud of something. When roll call came, Clayton paused at Jamal's name. Reed, he said slowly. Any relation to the gentleman trending on Instagram this morning? Gas rippled. Amir's jaw dropped. Jamal's hand curled into a fist, then released. I'm only related to men worth listening to, he said calmly. Clayton laughed. Touché, then moved on. The class never looked the same at Jamal again. Not because they believed Clayton, but because they didn't care if it was true or not. It was entertaining, and that was enough. Outside the classroom, things escalated. More photos, more fake quotes. Someone made a fake Twitter account under the name @Agent Hoodie Files, posting made-up stories. He says his dad works at the Pentagon, but we saw him pumping gas on Route 7. Next episode, Jamal hacks the cafeteria to give himself extra pudding. The worst one was a video montage, cut together with Jamal's voice spliced from different class clips, edited to sound like he was ranting about conspiracies and secret missions. It was absurd, clearly fake, but people laughed anyway. He became a meme, a parody, a character in their private play. And no one stopped it, because no teacher wanted to step into a fire they didn't understand, because confronting racism at Kensington meant shaking the walls of their own privilege, and they'd rather repaint the walls than repair the foundation. That night, he sat across from his father again. Leon didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, it's time. Jamal didn't respond. He knew what that meant. Leon slid a folder across the table. Inside, documents, letters, credentials, clearance levels, training manuals, agency awards, all unclassified but potent. Show them this? Jamal asked. No, Leon said. Not yet. You don't need to prove anything, but when the moment comes, you'll know what to do. Jamal closed the folder, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like the storm might pass, not because it would calm down, but because he was ready to walk through it. The following morning, Ms. Daniels called Jamal into her office. Her tone was professional, polished, but something in her eyes had changed. Less sympathy, more concern, for the school, not for him. We've been made aware of a social media situation, she said, gesturing to the stack of printed screenshots on her desk. Jamal didn't sit. He stayed standing, hoodie up. She continued, This is deeply troubling, clearly fabricated, potentially libelous. He raised an eyebrow. And we're launching an internal review. Jamal crossed his arms. That doesn't mean anything. Ms. Daniels sighed. We have procedures, Jamal. We have to follow them. You didn't need procedures to let Clayton humiliate me, or when they laughed during my presentation, or when they put my face on flyers. No forms were filed then. Her face tightened. This is serious, she said. It was serious from the beginning, he replied. Outside the office, the whispers didn't stop. They changed flavor, more cautious, less bold, because now everyone knew the administration was involved. Some felt guilty, some were scared. But most were quiet because their fun had been interrupted. They didn't stop because they learned. They stopped because they were caught. In gym class, Coach Tanner pulled Jamal aside. Hey, kid, he said, scratching his beard awkwardly. I don't know what's going on, but just keep your head up. Jamal nodded. Thanks. Then walked away. Because the truth was, he didn't need their comfort. He needed their courage. And Kensington didn't produce courage. It produced silence. By the end of the week, something strange happened. One by one, students started posting statements. Not public apologies, just vague notes. Didn't mean to hurt anyone. Sometimes jokes go too far. Taking time to reflect, Carter posted a black screen with white text. I've learned a lot this week. He didn't tag Jamal, didn't mention the flyers, didn't mention the mugshot post, but everyone knew. They weren't trying to fix what they'd broken. They were trying to protect their futures. In Clayton's class, things got tenser. He avoided eye contact now. No more jokes, no more smirks. But there was something meaner in his silence. Like he resented Jamal for not playing along. Like he hated the mirror Jamal had become. One day during a discussion on civil liberties, a student mentioned surveillance culture. Clayton chimed in, "It's not always the government watching. Sometimes it's students creating narratives, inventing threats where there are none." Jamal spoke, calm, controlled. Sometimes it's adults with power rewriting stories because they're afraid of who's actually holding the pen. The class froze. Clayton's lips tightened. He moved on without another word. But everyone felt it. The shift. The balance of power tilting slowly. That night, Alicia messaged Jamal. Not a DM. A long email. She apologized. Admitted she'd laughed. Had shared one of the posts early on. Said she didn't understand. Didn't want to understand. Until she imagined her younger brother going through the same thing. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she wrote, "but I am asking for a second chance to be better." Jamal didn't respond, not because he was angry, but because he knew healing didn't come from fast fixes. It came from showing up every day and doing the hard work. And that would take time. That weekend, the story leaked to local press. Not the whole thing. Just a blog post from a former Kensington student. It read, "What happens when a black student tells the truth at a white school?" No names were mentioned, but Jamal's story was unmistakable. The post went viral in a different way. Parents shared it. Teachers whispered about it. Alumni began emailing the school board. And for the first time, Kensington Prep felt something it hadn't felt in years. Accountability. But Jamal, he was already looking beyond it. Because he understood something most of them didn't. Justice wasn't about getting an apology. It was about making sure the next boy in a hoodie didn't have to wear armor just to survive a school day. Monday morning was unusually quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes with calm, the kind that settles just before a storm hits. Jamal walked through the front gates of Kensington Prep like he always did. Shoulders squared, hoodie up, steps deliberate. But this time, something was different. People moved out of his way, not out of fear, out of recognition. He didn't need to speak anymore. His presence had become its own sentence, its own language. And still, he hadn't said the one thing they feared most, that he could bury them with the truth. First period was interrupted by an announcement. "Will Jamal Reed please report to the main office?" Heads turned, phones appeared. He walked out without flinching. The hallway stretched before him like a runway. When he arrived, the principal, Ms. Harlow, was waiting with two men in suits. They introduced themselves calmly, with firm handshakes. One was from the Department of Education's Civil Rights Office. The other was from the regional press. "I understand you have something to share," one said. Jamal nodded, reached into his backpack. and pulled out the folder his father gave him. One by one, he laid the documents on the table. Not in anger, in fact. Department of Defense clearance letters, commendation reports, scans of official IDs, a redacted operations summary that bore his father's name on the header. Leon Reed, National Threat Analysis Division. Silence, the kind that doesn't just hush a room, the kind that rewrites it. Across campus, Amir was watching the press conference live from his phone. So was Alicia. So was Carter. So was Clayton. When the truth landed, it didn't come with fireworks. It came with weight, and it crushed everything they'd built on assumptions. That afternoon, a letter went out to all faculty and parents. It was clean, professional. Words like investigation, corrective steps, and community values. But what it really said was, we were wrong. Jamal didn't gloat, didn't post, didn't celebrate, because this wasn't a victory, it was a warning. To every system that laughed before it listened. The school board met in private. Clayton was suspended indefinitely, his tenure quietly revoked. Students named in the harassment were required to attend a full bias training series. One family, Carter's, threatened to sue, but the board didn't blink because the school had already gone too far down the wrong road, and Jamal, he had never taken a single step off the right one. That evening, he stood in the backyard with his father. The sun was dipping low, crickets chirping, hoodie still on. Leon handed him a slip of paper, a quote, typed, folded, simple. The most dangerous weapon is not the gun, the lie, or the fist. It's the truth, carried silently until the world can no longer deny it. Jamal read it once, twice, then folded it again and tucked it into his pocket. He didn't need to post it, didn't need to preach it, because now everyone who mattered had already heard it, loud and clear. It had been days since Jamal exposed the truth. The documents, the clearance letters, the credentials that shattered every whisper and burned through every meme. But Jamal knew, truth didn't stop the noise. It only changed its tone. Now it wasn't mocking laughter in the halls, it was tension. Students looked at him like he was holding a weapon instead of a backpack. Teachers stumbled over their words in front of him. Even Clayton, before his suspension, had barely spoken, his voice cracking the one time he said Jamal's name. But Jamal wasn't angry anymore. He was tired. Exhaustion didn't come from being hated. It came from having to prove your humanity again and again in a place that pretended it already respected it. Leon Reed had stayed in the background all this time, a shadow in Jamal's story, a voice over dinner, a steady hand on the shoulder. But now he was no longer just a name. He was a man with gravity, with presence. And on Friday morning, that presence walked through the front doors of Kensington Prep. He wore a black tailored coat, a gray shirt open at the collar, no tie, polished but not flashy, professional but not trying. A man who didn't need to prove anything because his resume walked 5 feet ahead of him. The receptionist looked up, froze. "Can I help you, sir?" Leon smiled. "I believe Ms. Harlow is expecting me." She wasn't. But 5 minutes later, the principal was standing outside her office, trying to adjust her tone to match her surprise. "Mr. Reed," she said, "we weren't informed." "No," he replied, "you weren't." Then he stepped inside. Jamal sat at the edge of his physics class, eyes on the clock. His father was in the building. He hadn't told anyone. Not Amir, not Alicia, not even his teacher. Because this wasn't a show, it was a statement. A reminder that silence doesn't mean absence. That just because someone is quiet doesn't mean they're not watching. Inside the office, Ms. Harlow offered Leon a chair. He declined. "I've read your statements," he said calmly. "I've seen the action plans, the public letters, the press releases." Harlow nodded. "We're committed to making this right." Leon held up a hand. "I'm not here to hear apologies." She blinked. "Then, what are you here for?" Leon leaned forward, resting both hands on the table. "To make sure you understand what my son has already taught the school." "Which is?" Leon's voice dropped. "That you don't get to define who's dangerous and who's dignified based on what they wear, how they speak, or how quiet they are." Outside, the halls buzzed. News spread fast. "Jamal's dad is here. Is it true he works for the government?" "No, he is the government. I heard he shut down Clayton's clearance. I heard he trained FBI agents." Rumors built faster than truth ever could, but it didn't matter, because the shadow had stepped into the light, and Kensington couldn't look away. Ms. Harlow sat back, trying to recalibrate. Leon Reed wasn't what she expected. She'd imagined a man quick to defend his son, maybe loud, maybe emotional. She was prepared for outrage, even braced for accusations. But this calm, this authority that filled the room without raising its voice, was something else entirely. "You have to understand," she began, her tone softer now, more measured. "We didn't anticipate how far this would go." Leon tilted his head. "No, you didn't. And we've taken disciplinary steps." Leon interrupted again, but gently. "I'm not interested in discipline." Ms. Harlow blinked. "You're not." "No," he said. "Discipline's reactive. I'm interested in what happens next time. Because there will be a next time. And it won't just be my son." She looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time, she saw it. Not just a parent, a strategist. Someone who had been in rooms where lives depended on details. Someone who knew exactly how power worked and how institutions hid behind procedure. Across campus, Jamal sat in his final period class. The air felt different, lighter somehow, like something toxic had been pulled from the walls and tossed into the sun. People still stared, but it wasn't the same kind of stare. This wasn't ridicule, it was recalculation. They were adjusting, because now Jamal wasn't just the quiet black kid in a hoodie with a wild story. He was the son of the man who had just walked into Kensington's core and flipped the script without saying a single angry word. Leon didn't stay long. He didn't ask for a tour, didn't shake hands, didn't pose for photos or call the press. He simply walked out the same way he came in, through the front doors, silent and deliberate. But those who saw him leave would remember the way the security guard at the front stood a little straighter. How a teacher nearby lowered her voice as he passed. How even the hallway chatter seemed to hush for a beat. Some men carry power in their voice. Others carry it in their silence. Leon Reed was the latter. Back in Ms. Harlow's office, the phone rang. It was the school board. They'd received a formal request from a federal education oversight committee to conduct a bias and equity review at Kensington Prep. Anonymous trigger, but she had a good guess who'd prompted it. She hung up slowly, her fingers trembling slightly. Leon hadn't made threats. He hadn't needed to. He'd simply made them visible to people who didn't know they were being watched. And that was more powerful than any speech. In the days that followed, everything changed. Posters about student dignity were suddenly everywhere. The counseling office extended hours. Teachers began revising curriculum, adding more authors of color, inviting guest speakers. It all looked good on the surface, but Jamal knew the truth. This wasn't reform, it was response, triggered not by a sense of justice, but by the quiet pressure of a man who never raised his voice and never needed to. Alicia approached Jamal at lunch. "I saw your dad," she said. Jamal looked up from his tray. "Yeah, he's different." Jamal smirked faintly. "He tends to have that effect." She hesitated. "What was that like, watching him walk through the school?" Jamal thought for a moment, then said, "Like watching the part of me they can't laugh at show up in person." She nodded slowly. "They're afraid of him." "No," Jamal corrected. "They're afraid of what he represents." "What's that?" Jamal's eyes were steady. "Control, without apology." In the teacher's lounge, conversations shifted. Some defended Clayton, others were silent, but a few quietly admitted the truth. "We saw it happening, we said nothing." And now they were asking questions they should have asked from the beginning. Why did we doubt him? What made us laugh so easily? What else are we missing? It was uncomfortable, necessary, and long overdue. Friday afternoon. The sunlight stretched low across the Kensington Prep courtyard, touching the tops of the marble pillars, sliding through the glass facade of the administration wing. It was quiet, not the rehearsed silence of morning announcements, but the kind that came after something important, something unshakable. Jamal sat beneath the oak tree near the west lawn, notebook in hand, not writing, just holding it, letting the wind flip the pages. He hadn't spoken to his father since he left the school. Didn't need to. Everything had been said in that walk, that look, that silence. Amir found him just after fourth bell. He dropped his bag, flopped on the grass beside him. "Dude, you have no idea." Jamal raised an eyebrow. "What now?" "Clayton's officially out. Not just suspended, gone. Contract terminated." Jamal nodded slowly. "Figures. That's not all. Ms. Daniels is stepping down next semester." Jamal turned his head. Amir nodded. "They announced it to staff. Said it's unrelated. But come on." Jamal closed his notebook gently. The shadow did its job. Amir looked at him. "You know your dad didn't say a single thing publicly, right? No press, no article, no lawsuit, nothing." "That's how he works," Jamal said. "Quiet force. Moves things from behind the curtain." Amir whistled. "Man, you're your father's son." Jamal didn't answer, but a quiet smile crossed his lips. That evening, Leon stood in the garage, unpacking an old box labeled Archives. Jamal walked in, leaned against the wall. "You made them nervous." Leon glanced over. "They needed to feel it." Jamal hesitated. "Why didn't you do it sooner?" Leon took a breath. "Because it wasn't my fight." Jamal looked confused. Leon continued. "It had to be yours first. If I stepped in too early, they'd say I saved you. But you saved yourself. I just made sure the fire didn't burn your future down." Jamal nodded, slowly, gratefully. 3 days later, a letter appeared in Jamal's locker. Unmarked envelope, no return name. Inside, a handwritten note on lined paper. "You didn't break. I watched them try. I laughed too, at first. But then I saw you stand there silent, and I realized I couldn't. Thank you for not disappearing." No signature, just a folded flyer. one of the first ones? The Agent Hoodie one, except now the words were crossed out. And beneath them, scrawled in red ink, the realest one in the room. The following week, Jamal stood before a panel of administrators, students, and two parents, not to defend himself, but to lead a new initiative, the Truth Project. His proposal was simple, a student-led platform where unheard voices could speak, real stories, anonymous or not, no edits, no judgment. He ended with one line. Before you laugh at someone's truth, ask why yours needs to feel taller. The room went silent, then slowly, applause. Not loud, but real. From the chest, not just the hands. That night, Jamal and Leon sat in the kitchen, a quiet meal between them. Leon poured 2 glasses of water. No wine, no celebration. Just a normal night. You changed something, Leon said. No, Jamal replied. I remembered something. What's that? Jamal looked at his hoodie draped over the chair. That silence is only dangerous to those who build their power on noise. Leon smiled. No more words, just 2 men, 2 stories. One shadow that no longer needed to hide. It didn't start with a bang. There were no viral videos this time. No bold declarations. No student protests with signs and slogans. Just silence. The same silence Jamal had lived with since day one. Only now it wasn't his. Now it belonged to them. Mr. Clayton's name was the first thing to vanish. One Monday morning, the teacher's directory on the Kensington Prep website quietly updated. Where it once read Jonathan Clayton, Civics and Government, there was now an empty space. Not even a placeholder, like he'd never existed. His classroom was locked, the door covered in brown butcher paper. Some students said he was on sabbatical. Others claimed he was suspended, under investigation. But those were just stories. Jamal didn't need to guess. He knew. Clayton wasn't gone because of a single offense. He was gone because his mask had slipped. Too publicly, too many times. And when people like Clayton lose their masks, the institutions that once protected them pretend they were never there. The silence spread. Carter Van Allen stopped sitting in the front row of assemblies. His usual smug confidence dissolved into a kind of stiff politeness. He greeted teachers too eagerly, raised his hand too often, and spent lunch periods quietly scrolling through his phone, like he was hoping the glow of the screen could erase everything. He never approached Jamal, never apologized, never even made eye contact. But every time Jamal passed him in the hallway, Carter looked down, like someone carrying shame he didn't know how to name. Tyler Jamison tried to rewrite history in real time. He walked around campus with a new tone, woke, gentle, overly corrected, started quoting Black authors in literature class, asked questions about social justice in history. Jamal watched it all from a distance, not with bitterness, with clarity, because this wasn't remorse, it was survival. Tyler wasn't sorry, he was adapting, learning how to shapeshift fast enough to keep his position, even after the system shifted beneath his feet. And then there was Harper, the girl who once laughed the loudest during Agent Hoodie jokes. She barely spoke anymore, avoided group discussions, started showing up late, eyes tired, as if carrying something heavy. One morning, Jamal saw her outside the counseling office, sitting alone, staring at her shoes. Their eyes met. She looked away. Not because she hated him, but because she finally understood what it meant to be looked at and misread. The administration's tone shifted too. Teachers began opening class with check-ins. Words like inclusion and empathy appeared on whiteboards. Posters went up across campus. We listen. We learn. we grow. There were new faculty meetings, new committees, new lesson plans. But Jamal could see through the updates. These weren't changes. They were corrections, designed not to heal but to protect the brand. And Kensington was very good at protecting its brand. One afternoon, Amir slammed his locker shut. "Feels fake," he muttered. "All of it." Jamal didn't respond. Like they're trying to act like this place never tried to eat you alive. Still, Jamal stayed quiet. I mean, come on. Flyers? Fake mugshots? That crap would have destroyed someone else. Now Jamal looked at him. Calm. It almost destroyed me. Amir swallowed hard. But it didn't, Jamal added. That's what scares them now. The real shift came when the internal review leaked. 12 pages. Typed. Double-spaced. Cold and damning. Someone had sent it anonymously to a blog run by Kensington alumni. The headline the blog used said it all. Elite school fails its quietest student. The truth about Kensington Prep. Within hours, local reporters were calling. Parent forums exploded. Teachers who had turned blind eyes now turned red-faced with panic. Because the report didn't just highlight what had happened, it exposed the structure that allowed it. A section titled Cultural Blind Spots read, "The student, Jamal Reed, presented no history of behavioral issues, strong academic performance, and multiple records of respectful conduct. Despite this, faculty responses to his claims were delayed, dismissive, or absent entirely." This demonstrates a cultural framework that prioritizes familiarity over fairness, comfort over confrontation. Another line hit even harder. Silence was weaponized against the student. When he refused to play the expected role, the institution interpreted that refusal as dishonesty. It was all there. The jokes, the staff complicity, even the specific language Clayton used in class. Suddenly, the truth wasn't just in Jamal's folder. It was everywhere. Undeniable. Permanent. In the week that followed, emails started flying. Ms. Daniels, the dean of students, announced she'd be stepping down to pursue new opportunities. Everyone knew what that meant. 3 other teachers were reassigned. A diversity consultant was brought in. Not hired, brought in. 1 week only, temporary, symbolic. But Jamal didn't feel victorious. There were no trophies for surviving, no medals for standing still while they tried to shake your story loose. When Leon heard the report was public, he didn't smile. He just said, "Good. Now they can't pretend." Then went back to reading the paper. Even Alicia, who had written Jamal that quiet letter weeks earlier, was shaken. "This place," she told him one day after class, "it's built on names, on whispers, on smiling while stepping on people." Jamal tilted his head. "And now?" She looked away. "Now the floor's cracking. In the cafeteria, the corner table Jamal and Amir once sat at alone had become a space of quiet gravity. People didn't join them, but they didn't mock them either. Some nodded, some stayed back, unsure what to say. And Jamal? He never stopped wearing his hoodie, never raised his voice, never gloated, because his win wasn't their fall. It was their realization that he'd never needed their approval to be whole. The town hall was scheduled for Thursday night. No one expected it to be anything but a show, another scripted performance by the administration to assure angry parents that everything was under control. Kensington had always been good at managing optics. They knew which words soothed, which terms sounded progressive enough to deflect criticism. But that night, something cracked. It wasn't what was said. It was who was in the room. Jamal arrived with Leon, both sitting quietly in the third row from the back. No fanfare, no attention drawn to them. But their presence didn't go unnoticed. Parents nudged each other. Teachers stiffened. Some students, attending out of curiosity or fear of being mentioned, froze when they saw them walk in. The head of the board opened with a speech. It was rehearsed, of course. Here at Kensington, we strive to be a place of equity, excellence, and empathy. The recent events have challenged us to look within. We are not perfect, but we are listening. Jamal barely reacted. He'd heard this tone before. Not in school, in systems, in boardrooms, in interviews with sanitized words and sharp suits. It always sounded the same when power tried to sound sorry. Then came the microphone. Open floor. That's when things shifted. The first to speak was a white parent, Mrs. Langdon. Her son was in Jamal's chemistry class. I want to believe the school is doing everything it can, she said. But if a student like Jamal, who's never caused trouble, can go through that much abuse without immediate protection, then what does that say about the rest of us? Murmurs followed. A few heads nodded. Then came Mr. Patel, Amir's father. He didn't mince words. I'm not here to protect your reputation, he said, his accent clear and unwavering. I'm here because my son watched a friend nearly lose his voice in a place that promised to value it. He turned toward the panel. This isn't about one teacher. This is about the culture that let him thrive, that lets students weaponize their ignorance while adults stood aside. The room was silent, not defensively, not dismissively, guiltily. Then Alicia stood. She didn't speak right away, just held the microphone, breathing. I laughed, she said finally, when the videos came out, when the flyers showed up. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I didn't want to be the one who said, this isn't okay, and get pushed out next. Her voice cracked. I was complicit, and I'm sorry. She didn't look at Jamal when she said it. She didn't need to. He already knew. More voices followed. A black alumnus from the class of 2004 shared his experience being silenced. A current sophomore recounted how their teacher dismissed their concern about racial bias in a group project just a week earlier. And with each story, the pristine image of Kensington crumbled a little more. The truth wasn't just Jamal's anymore. It had multiplied. The final moment came when Leon stood, not because he wanted to, but because a man in the second row, a board member, asked directly, Mr. Reed, would you like to comment? Leon stood slowly, didn't approach the microphone. His voice didn't need it. My son told the truth, over and over. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He didn't run. And still, the institution, the one you promised would see him, chose to laugh, question, and delay. He looked at the board. I'm not here to demand justice. I'm here to ask, how many more Jamals are you willing to lose before you change how you see them? Then he sat down. Nothing more. Jamal didn't speak that night. He didn't need to. They all heard him, through every voice that rose on his behalf, through every truth that used to be silence. The next day, the front office received more than 24 letters, some from parents, some from alumni, some anonymous, all asking the same question. What are you doing, really doing, to protect the next Jamal Reed? Kensington didn't have an answer yet, but the silence, it was finally theirs. And for once, they were the ones who had to live in it. In the weeks that followed, the air at Kensington shifted in a way that couldn't be measured by announcements or policy memos. It was in the small things, the way teachers hesitated before making jokes, The way students looked up when someone was being talked over. The way eyes now lingered a little longer, not with judgment, but with the fragile hope of understanding. There were no more posters mocking Jamal, no more fake flyers. The Agent Hoodie account had been deactivated quietly. No public apology, just digital silence. A few students whispered about who had really run it, but the names no longer mattered. What mattered was that it no longer lived in the open, because the culture that fed it had stopped laughing. One morning as Jamal walked into school, the receptionist looked up and smiled, genuinely. "Morning, Mr. Reed." He paused, not because he was surprised, but because it was the first time someone at that desk had said his full name without checking a list or second-guessing his place. He nodded. "Morning," then kept walking. His hoodie was still up, not in defiance, not in protest. It just belonged to him now, the way his name did. In English class, the unit had shifted to modern narratives. The teacher assigned a reading by Ta-Nehisi Coates, and for once they didn't skip over the parts about race. Jamal could feel the discomfort ripple through the room, but no one laughed. Not even Carter, especially not Carter, because something inside him had broken, or maybe cracked just enough to let truth seep in. And Jamal didn't hate him for that. Pity maybe, but not hate. He knew what it was like to wake up one day and realize the story you were living in wasn't written by you. One afternoon, Alicia joined Jamal and Amir at the lunch table. No one said anything at first. Then she cleared her throat. "I'm applying for the Student Equity Board," she said. Amir raised an eyebrow. "Didn't even know we had one." "We didn't," she replied. "We do now." She looked at Jamal. Not with guilt this time, but with resolve. "I'm not doing this to prove anything. I'm doing it because the silence helped me before. I don't want it to help me again." Jamal nodded slowly. That was enough. Ms. Harlow stepped down that spring. The letter said she was grateful for her years of service and ready for new challenges. No one clapped during the announcement, not out of malice, out of recognition. Her challenge hadn't been leading Kensington. It had been listening to it, and she'd waited too long to do so. The school board approved a scholarship fund in Jamal's name. He declined it, but asked if it could be converted. "Call it something else," he told them. "Make it anonymous. Give it to the next kid who walks in like I did, with everything to offer and nowhere safe to speak." They agreed. That summer, a student podcast asked Jamal for an interview. He said no, he didn't need a headline, didn't want a quote. He wanted space and peace and his hoodie. The day after graduation, Jamal stood alone in the East Wing hallway, the one where the first flyer had been taped up. He reached into his backpack, pulled out a folded paper, the very first flyer they made. He'd kept it, not as a scar, as a seed. He unfolded it slowly, then slid it behind the radiator. Let it rest where it began. Let it stay in the walls, not to haunt the school, but to remind it that silence, once broken, never leaves quietly. There was no confetti when Jamal walked back into school after the storm. No dramatic reconciliation, no student flash mob performing apologies choreographed to some inspirational pop song. The halls didn't part like the Red Sea, and no one handed him a plaque. And he was okay with that, because Jamal Reed wasn't looking for redemption. He was the redemption. He hadn't broken, he hadn't bent, he hadn't raised his voice, but they had all heard him anyway. And now every step he took through those polished, marble-trimmed halls was a lesson, not just to them, but to himself. That the quietest ones carry the heaviest truths, that endurance is resistance, And that dignity doesn't beg to be seen. It shows up every day in the same hoodie and walks on. His locker was still the same. Old number, slightly rusted hinge, the faint scratch where someone had once carved "Spy Boy" in pencil and then half erased it. He didn't buff it out, didn't cover it, he left it there. A scar that didn't need healing, only remembering. Every time he spun the dial, 32, 14, 7, it was a reminder. They tried to write his name in mockery, and it became part of his legacy. Jamal started journaling again, but not like before. Before, it had been survival math. Who said what, when, what they meant, what they didn't. He'd mapped personalities like algorithms, calculating which version of himself to wear, when to smile, when to disappear. Now his words were different, more observant, more still. He wrote about the sound the courtyard made when the wind swept through the stone columns, the way the light hit Alicia's curls when she walked past the history wing. Head held a little higher now, the taste of silence when it wasn't loaded with fear. He was finally learning how to breathe in spaces that once tried to suffocate him. Some students still didn't get it, didn't want to get it. They asked dumb questions in whispers, safe behind performative curiosity. Wait, was his dad really in the Pentagon? I heard they faked the paperwork to get the school in trouble. He's still weird though, like, what's his deal? But the difference now? No one laughed with them, no one played along, and slowly they grew quiet. Not because they learned, but because the room stopped rewarding their ignorance. Alicia, who used to sit 3 seats away from Jamal like silence was contagious, now sat beside him at lunch. Not every day, but often enough that people noticed. She didn't try too hard, didn't overcompensate, she just showed up. One Thursday, she brought 2 sandwiches, set one in front of him without a word. He looked down. It was turkey and provolone, his favorite. How'd you know? She smirked. Read your essay last semester. You mentioned it twice. He raised an eyebrow. She shrugged. I pay attention now. Mr. Allen, the chemistry teacher, pulled him aside after class one day. He looked nervous, older, not in years, but in awareness. I should have said something, he started. Back then, during all of it. Jamal didn't flinch. I noticed, Mr. Allen continued, but I thought staying quiet made me neutral. Now I see silence isn't neutral, it's complicit. Jamal nodded once. It's okay. No, Allen said, but I'm working on making it better. That night, Jamal wrote in his journal, not every apology needs a sentence. Sometimes it's a decision repeated until it becomes a new pattern. Amir, still loyal, still wild with energy, kept finding ways to uplift Jamal without ever making him a project. He nominated him for a Civic Leadership Award. Jamal declined. He suggested they co-author an article for the school paper. Jamal refused. Finally, Amir snapped. Dude, let people celebrate you. Jamal looked up from his notebook, quiet as ever. I don't need their trophies. But you earned this. Jamal smiled. Maybe, but if I take their applause, I take their control, and I just got that back. At home, Leon had shifted too. He smiled more often now. Cooked breakfast when he had time. Sat with Jamal in the evenings, not always talking, just being. One night he pulled out a dusty photo album. Inside, old Polaroids, newspaper clippings, a picture of Jamal as a toddler in a government-issued daycare, sleeping with his hand clutching a plastic airplane. You always liked things that flew, Leon said. Jamal grinned. Guess I liked escape. Leon leaned back. Now you're not escaping anymore. Now you're building. Jamal's hoodie became its own kind of legend. Some teachers still didn't like it, but they didn't say anything anymore. Because it wasn't just cotton and seams, it was protest and pride and memory. And every student who once feared being too different, too soft, too unseen, saw it and knew they weren't alone. And Jamal, he was finally learning what it meant to just be, not as a symbol, not as a shadow, but as himself, black, brilliant, and unbothered. It was early spring when the school invited Jamal to speak at the Student Leadership Symposium. Not because he campaigned for it, not because he submitted a speech, but because the other students nominated him, quietly, anonymously. Even then, he nearly said no. It was Amir who changed his mind. You don't have to say anything big, he told him. You just have to stand there. Jamal laughed. You want me to give a speech by not giving a speech? No, Amir said. I want you to remind them what real presence looks like. The day of the symposium, the auditorium was packed. Parents, staff, community partners, local reporters. Jamal stood backstage, hoodie zipped, fingers tracing the edge of his note card. It only had 5 lines written on it. Nothing rehearsed, just thoughts. When his name was called, he stepped forward, steady, calm, unflinching. He didn't take the podium. He stood beside it, hands at his sides, and waited. At first, people thought he was pausing, but after 20 seconds of silence, it became something else, a discomfort, a mirror. People started shifting in their seats, clearing their throats. And then Jamal said, "Now you understand what silence feels like." He let it settle, then added, "Imagine carrying that every day and still being expected to smile. No theatrics, no sermon, just truth. And truth didn't need a microphone." Afterward, Ms. Daniels, no longer dean, now just a quiet admin figure, approached him. "I didn't expect you to come," she admitted. "I didn't come for you," Jamal said. She nodded. "Still, thank you for being brave." He shook his head gently. It wasn't about bravery. It was about boundaries. Boundaries? Jamal met her gaze. You don't get to step on someone and be surprised when they rise instead of break. More students started reaching out. A freshman girl, Latina, small voice, left a note in Jamal's locker. "I used to hide my accent. Now I don't." A Korean student he barely knew asked if he wanted to join a new group focused on digital harassment education. A white boy, Jack from his gym class, stopped him after third period. "Hey, my brother used to call me weak for not standing up to guys like Carter." Jamal waited. "But I watched what you did," Jack said. "And now I know it's not weakness. It's power. Just a different kind." One afternoon, Mrs. Grace, the security guard, waved him over by the east wing. "You started something, baby." Jamal tilted his head. They talk different now. Teachers, kids, even staff. Like they're listening with both ears instead of one. She grinned. Didn't take no riot. Didn't take no protest. She tapped his chest lightly. Just took a boy who knew who he was. Jamal visited the library more often again. Not to escape. To breathe. To think. Sometimes he'd see other students sitting alone, staring out the window like they were figuring something out about themselves. Sometimes they looked at him and nodded. Not admiration, recognition, like they saw their future walking past. Ennett wore a hoodie. He started tutoring a sophomore named Elijah. Quiet kid, wore a beanie year-round. Bright but shaky in confidence. One day after math review, Elijah stayed behind. You think it gets better? He asked. Jamal leaned back. No, Elijah frowned. But you get stronger, Jamal added. And one day what they say won't mean anything unless you believe it. Elijah smiled, just a little. That's enough, he whispered. Leon watched all of this with quiet pride. He never boasted, never posted, but he kept every newspaper clipping, every mention, every flyer Jamal had folded into his drawer over the past year. One night he laid them out on the dining table. Jamal walked in, saw the timeline of his pain, his fight, and his growth arranged like evidence. Leon pointed to the first flyer. You turn this into all of that, he said, then pointed to Jamal. Without losing this. Jamal didn't reply, just hugged his father for the first time in weeks. Tight, long, certain. By the time the school year neared its end, Jamal no longer felt like a visitor at Kensington. He didn't feel like a symbol either. He just felt like himself. And that, after everything, was the deepest transformation. Not that the system had changed overnight, not that racism vanished, but that Jamal no longer carried the weight of being misunderstood, because he'd finally let go of needing to be understood at all. There was a moment, subtle, almost forgettable, that stayed with him. He was walking down the main hallway when a new student passed by, a black kid, freshman, skinny, wore his hoodie high, strings pulled tight like Jamal used to. They made eye contact for just a second. The kid didn't speak, didn't smile, but his eyes said everything. Thank you for making space. And Jamal nodded back, silent. That moment was the real award. Not a medal, not a headline. A gaze passed between two shadows, two stories, both now visible. The final week of school, they gave seniors the chance to write one line in chalk across the front steps of the main building. A tradition. Most wrote predictable things. Peace out. Class of greatness. On to better things. Jamal didn't write his name. He didn't even write a quote. He knelt slowly, chalk in hand, and etched 5 words into the concrete. Still waters. Deep. Unbothered. Unbent. Then stood, brushed off his hands, and walked away. At home, Leon cooked breakfast on graduation day. Same as always, eggs, toast, tea. Jamal came down wearing his cap, gown hanging loosely off one shoulder. Leon handed him a note. Inside, you walked through a world that wasn't made for you, and made it learn your name anyway. That's legacy. That's power. That's Reed. Jamal folded it once, then again, slid it into his pocket. It stayed there all day. Not for anyone else, just for him. At the ceremony, people clapped. Some even stood when his name was called. But Jamal didn't look at the crowd. He looked past them, at the sky, at the trees beyond the bleachers, at everything that reminded him he was never meant to be caged by applause. He shook the principal's hand, took his diploma, and walked off stage without looking back, because forward was always where he was headed. Later that night, he stood alone in front of the school. One last time. The air was warm, the stars quiet. He wore his hoodie over his gown now, just the way he started. And before he left, he whispered into the night, "Still here." No one responded. No one needed to. Because the wind moved just slightly through the columns of Kensington Prep. And even the building seemed to know it had finally learned something. The last bell of the year rang like it always did. Sharp, clean, official. But this time, it didn't echo the same. For Jamal, it didn't mark freedom or celebration. It didn't signal escape or arrival. It simply meant the end of a chapter he never asked to write but had authored anyway, one page at a time. in silence, in fire, in stone. He closed his locker slowly. Inside was still that scuff from when someone had kicked it back in junior year. That small dent where he once slammed it shut a little too hard after another Clayton microaggression. The tape residue from the poster Amir once made that read, "Future Architect of Change." It had peeled off during winter break, but the glue stayed behind. Ghosts always did. And there, still clinging to the back of the locker like a quiet manifesto, was the quote he taped up right after the town hall. "You are not what they assume. You are what you survive." He peeled it off carefully, folded it into squares like a sacred note, slipped it into the chest pocket of his hoodie, right above the heart. Then he spun the combination lock one last time, 32, 14, 7, and walked away from the space that once held his silence like a secret. Outside, the courtyard exploded with life. Confetti cannons, yearbooks scribbled in half-truths and inside jokes, Bluetooth speakers thumping beats of summer promises. Students jumped into one another's arms, tears on some faces, joy on others. They were loud, so loud. And still, Jamal felt like he was moving underwater. He walked through them, past the clusters of noise, not apart, but not within either. Some clapped his shoulder, others smiled too wide, their guilt disguised as friendliness. A few held his gaze for a heartbeat too long, unsure if they had earned the right. He gave each one the same thing, a nod. That was all. He had nothing more to give them, because he hadn't come for closure. He was the closure. He found Amir near the vending machines, the ones that always ate your money unless you tapped them twice and said, "Come on, man," like they had feelings. Amir grinned, like always. But it was a quieter grin now, more weathered, like he'd aged 2 years in one. "You made it," Amir said. Jamal didn't respond at first. He just took a breath. "Feels weird," he finally said. "Like, the walls should have said something." "They did," Amir replied. "Every time they didn't move, every time they tried to push you out, you pushed back without screaming. The walls remember that." Jamal looked at him. "Most people scream when they want to be heard." "Yeah," Amir said. "But you stood still. That's louder." They didn't need to hug. Boys like them didn't always need to say goodbye, because survival had already made them brothers. He didn't go to the senior send-off, didn't need the speeches, the staged laughter, the photo booths with class of excellence, banners and fake gold balloons. Instead, Jamal walked home. No cap, no gown, just the hoodie. Always the hoodie. It was the same one they mocked, the same one they associated with threat, with lies, with shadows. Now it was his graduation robe, and it fit better than anything the school ever handed him. His route home took him past the same bus stop where he used to wait in the dark before sunrise, earbuds in, fingers curled in his sleeves to fight the cold. He remembered how many mornings he told himself, "Just make it through today." Over and over, a survival prayer. He passed the deli where Mrs. Lorna always gave him 2 napkins and never asked why, where he once sat at the plastic table with peanut butter crackers, listening to Clayton's words ring in his ears. "Fiction can be powerful, Mr. Reed." He passed the basketball court, where he once dropped his backpack and just shot hoops for an hour straight, alone, because if he didn't do something with his hands, the anger would eat him alive. Every place along that route held a part of the boy he'd been, and each one nodded to the man he was becoming. At the mural wall, he stopped. It was new, colorful, raw, painted by students a few months ago. A black boy with a galaxy behind his head, a hoodie that sparkled like a night sky. Words above him, still here, still rising. No one said it was Jamal, but everyone knew. He stood there for a long while, didn't take a picture, didn't tag the artist, didn't need to. He just stood in silence and let the wall see him. Because sometimes that's the only conversation that matters. A few blocks down, he heard the tires before he saw the bike. A kid, couldn't be more than 8, skidded to a stop right next to him. Big helmet, bigger eyes. "You're him, right?" the boy asked. Jamal blinked. "Him? My cousin said you're the one who changed the school." Jamal paused, smiled slightly. "I just told the truth." The boy squinted. "Didn't they get mad?" "They always do at first." The kid looked down at Jamal's hoodie. "You wear it like armor." Jamal crouched, eye level now. "It's not armor," he said. "It's memory. Every stitch, every moment they said I didn't belong, I sewed that in." The boy nodded like he understood more than he should. "Can I wear mine to school?" "You should, even if they say something." Jamal smiled. "Especially if they say something." Then he stood and the boy rode off, shouting something over his shoulder Jamal couldn't hear but felt anyway. Like hope being passed on. Like a new page being written by someone who didn't have to start in the shadows. That night, the streets hummed with early summer life. Car radios, porch laughter, distant music from open windows. It was the kind of noise that didn't demand attention. It just existed, like the background rhythm of a city that was both indifferent and sacred. Jamal walked slower now, not because he was tired, but because the world felt different when you no longer owed it anything. When you'd told your truth, survived its echo, and were finally walking free, not away, but forward. He stopped by the school one last time, just to see it. Kensington stood tall, polished, and still trying too hard to look timeless. But Jamal knew the building was changed now, not by bricks or curriculum, but by memory, by a silence that had echoed so loudly it cracked the glass from the inside. The front steps were mostly empty, except for one student, Elijah. The sophomore Jamal had once tutored, beanie too big, posture always uncertain, but not tonight. Tonight, Elijah stood at the top of the stairs, eyes closed, arms crossed. Jamal approached quietly. "You all right?" he asked. Elijah opened his eyes. "I think so. Just thinking." "About?" Elijah looked down at his shoes. "Next year, everyone says I should run for student council. I kind of want to, but I don't know." Jamal raised an eyebrow. "What's stopping you?" Elijah shrugged. "Feels like people are still waiting to laugh." Jamal didn't answer right away. Then softly he said, "Let them, then do it anyway." Elijah smiled. Not wide, but deep. "I will." As Jamal turned to leave, Elijah called out, "Hey, you think it'll ever really change?" Jamal looked back over his shoulder. His face was still, but his words cut through the night like scripture. It already did. Then he was gone. Back home, Jamal sat on the porch with Leon. No words at first, just the creak of the old chair, the smell of tea and asphalt. Finally, Leon spoke. "Did you leave it all there?" Jamal thought for a moment. "Yeah, everything that needed to stay, I left behind." Leon nodded. "That's the trick, you know." "What is?" "Knowing the difference between what you carry and what you set down." Jamal took a slow sip from his cup. "I carried a lot." Leon looked at him. "You carried it right." Inside Jamal's room, nothing had changed. Same posters, same worn rug, same shoebox of flyers under the bed. Every insult they once weaponized now cataloged like museum exhibits. He didn't open the box that night. Didn't need to. He already knew what was inside. What mattered now was what lay ahead. Later he opened his notebook, half full, corners dog-eared, spine beginning to tear. On a clean page he wrote, "I am not a myth. I am the math of everything they didn't count on." He closed it again, slid it into his backpack, because the hoodie had walked through Kensington. But the notebook, that would walk through the world. Somewhere across town, someone was laughing at a meme. Somewhere else, a teacher was rewriting a syllabus. And somewhere, a kid who looked like Jamal was sitting on a bus in silence, wearing his hoodie like a shield, unaware that someone had already cracked the ceiling he was about to hit. That was the point. Jamal hadn't wanted fame. He wanted freedom. And now that he had it, he was already walking into the next story. Morning crept in gently the next day. No alarm, no classes, just light through the blinds, soft and honest. Jamal woke before the sun fully rose, sat on the edge of his bed, hoodie still wrapped around his shoulders like a second skin. He looked around the room, not searching, just remembering. There was no applause waiting outside, no camera crew to capture the hero of the story. But that was never why he did it. He stood, stretched, and slipped his phone into his pocket. Then he laced up his sneakers. One last walk before the world started calling. The block was still quiet, except for the old man hosing down the sidewalk, the lady with the 3 barking chihuahuas, and the guy who sold breakfast tacos from the cart at the corner. Jamal nodded to each of them, received nods back. That's how it worked here. Respect didn't need volume. He passed the corner store. Mrs. Lorna, sipping from a thermos, waved him over. "Graduated now, huh?" "Yes, ma'am." She looked him up and down. "Same hoodie." "Always," she smiled. "Good. Means you know who you are." He kept walking. Crossed the street where the bus stop bench still had that scratch someone once carved. They see the skin, not the soul. He'd read it 1,000 times. Today he traced it once with his finger, then kept moving. The sun was rising now. He reached the park, his favorite bench under the big oak tree still untouched. He sat, pulled out the notebook, wrote only one sentence. "Some stories are meant to be whispered so they echo louder." Then he closed it, leaned back, and breathed. Back at Kensington, a janitor unlocked the main entrance. He didn't notice the words still faintly chalked on the front steps. Still waters, deep, unbothered, unbent. Students would walk over them in a few weeks. Some would ignore them. Some would wonder. But one or two might pause and feel something shift. At a bookstore downtown, a young teacher picked up a copy of The Fire Next Time. Inside the cover, someone had scribbled, "Don't teach the text, teach the tension. J.R." She didn't know who J.R. was, but she underlined the note anyway. On a subway somewhere, a boy in a hoodie was being watched by a woman clutching her purse. He felt it. He always did. But this time, instead of shrinking, he sat taller. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice whispered, "They only fear what they don't understand." Don't let that become your reflection. Jamal didn't need to know all the ripples he'd made, didn't need to see every seed grow. What mattered was this. He walked into a system built to erase him and left footprints they couldn't scrub out. And he did it without ever raising his voice, because some voices don't rise. They endure. That evening, as the sun dipped low and turned the pavement gold, Jamal walked home again. Same streets, same stride. And though nothing around him had changed, everything inside him had. He wasn't walking away from the story. He was the story, and he wore it well. Soft cotton, frayed cuffs, pockets full of memory, his hoodie, his silence, his legacy, still walking. There was no parade, no news segment, no viral post that captured it all, but somewhere in a quiet hallway, a boy in a hoodie taught an entire institution what strength really looks like. Not by shouting, not by fighting, but by standing, by existing, by refusing to disappear. This wasn't just Jamal's story. It's the story of every black boy who ever sat in the back of the room with his hoodie up, not because he was hiding, but because that was the only way the world would leave him alone long enough to think. The only way to stay whole in a system that constantly tried to define him before he could define himself. Jamal didn't fight back in the way they expected. He didn't throw fists. He didn't beg for justice. He didn't run. He endured. And that's what they couldn't handle. Because silence that doesn't crumble becomes truth. And truth, especially when worn in a hoodie, is impossible to ignore forever. If you've ever felt unseen, if you've ever been laughed at, doubted, dismissed because of how you speak, where you're from, or the skin you wear, this story is yours too. Because behind every hoodie, there's a soul that refuses to be erased. And here in this space, on this channel, we see you, we believe you, and we'll keep telling stories that the world needs to hear, especially when the world would rather stay comfortable. If this story moved you, don't let it stop here. Subscribe to Silent Power Stories. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Turn on notifications so you never miss a truth that could change someone's life. Your one click could put this story in front of a kid wearing a hoodie in a school that still doesn't get it. And maybe, just maybe, he'll know he's not alone. Because we don't just tell stories, we pass on courage. One silent step at a time. Drop a comment. What did this story teach you? What's your hoodie moment? Let's talk in the comments. Your truth matters here. And remember, don't judge the cloth. See the courage beneath. From a kid they tried to erase,